Hello, welcome back to Collected Stories. We are doing our October reading wrap up where we just discuss the books that we read throughout the month. We give our thoughts, opinions, ratings. So grab a cup of tea and sit down and see if you like the books that we're reading. Maybe you can read some of them too and comment and follow along. All right, Mom, would you like to start us off?
Sure, will do. The first book I read from October was The Historian. Don't mind me if I'm looking down a lot. I have my notes, my book of books. This is by Elizabeth Kostova. I listened to it on audio. There was a cast doing it. The Goodreads was 3.79. I only gave it 2 stars. It's a very long book. It's a chunker.
Yeah.
There's not much action in the book. It's a very slow moving plot, very vague plot. It's about vampires, but there's a lot of scholarship involved, and it's a vampire who collects books. And I'm not sure. I think I might have fallen asleep a few times. I'm sorry if you like this book. I'm sure it's wonderful for the right person. It just wasn't the right book for me. That's all I really have to say on that one.
Yeah, I hear you. It's hard when like I enjoy a good scholarly book, but the action has to like correspond with the scholarly knowledge in order to make things go. Like Babel is a very dense scholarly book, but
Yes.
the action coincides with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was a big book. Thank God I listened to it. Thank God you can speed it up because I listened to it quite quickly.
All right. Well, the first book that I read of October was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I love this book a lot. It had pretty high ratings, and I was kind of unsure how to go into this book. I liked the main character a lot, so it was pretty easy to follow her along, and it was pretty easy to follow her train of thought and her actions and her feelings. They were all pretty valid, and I don't know, the main character going into a situation where, so I guess what it was about it takes place in Mexico in the 1950s, and her cousin married off to this guy, and they like don't see her anymore, and they're getting these very weird letters from their cousin, and they're feeling very concerned. So her dad makes a deal with her. He's like, "You go figure it out, and when you come back, you can go to college," which is her desire. So she has pretty high, incentive to kind of figure out what's going on, and it gets weirder and weirder and weirder when she goes to the house and stays with her cousin. It kind of goes into ghost haunting territory. And when books get like that, I get a little apprehensive because it kind of sets things up to be the ghosts aren't real or the ghosts are real. But it took a very creative third option, which I hadn't anticipated at all. So it's very surprising. You get very involved in the characters and rooting for the main character to kind of figure it out. So I found it very enjoyable. I thought it was also such a deep criticism about culture, and like I can't even go on and on about this book. I could do a whole separate video about how much I actually really enjoyed this book and all the meaning and symbolism in it. So I would give this like 4.5 stars.
Wow.
Um, which yeah, a lot. And there was actually a reference in it to another book that I had read, and I wasn't sure if I was right. But then at the end of the book, the author gives her thoughts and she gives her explanations for certain things, and she actually validated my hunch that there was a reference to it. So I thought it was very good.
I had read that and I didn't like it as much as you did. So I might have to give that a second try just to.
Did you listen to it or did you read it?
I listened to it. So this time I think I need to
I
read it.
think you gotta read it. You can borrow my copy.
I would say when you come home, bring it. I want to read it. My second book was, again, another audiobook. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. She's the one who did The Haunting of Hill House. The narrator was Bernadette Dunn, and she was great. I love this. It was horror, but not paranormal. It was psychological thriller type. It was mysterious. It had a gothic feel. It was bizarre. I had read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson back in college, and that was a story, I should say, that stuck with me all the way till now. I can still remember reading it and being like mind blown, like this was a crazy ass story. This again, bizarre, family dysfunction, toxic small town, just disturbing with
Yeah.
characters. It's the view from Mary Cat, who her name is Mary Catherine, but they all call her Mary Cat. and she and her sister and her uncle live in this house, and then a cousin comes to visit, and what goes on from there, there's mystery that her parents had died, her sister had gone on trial for it, for murdering them. It was just wonderfully disturbing. I give this 4 stars.
Okay, good. Yeah, we definitely read some spooky October.
Ah.
My next book though is completely different from kind of the October vibes I was going for.
Yep.
Book just caught my eye because the last month I had read some books by Dolly Alderton and really enjoyed her writing. And this book is not by her, but people said, they kind of compare the two authors, and Dolly Alderton gave her a foreword, like, for the cover. And so this book was The Rachel Incident. And it takes place in Ireland in the early 2000s. And this young, just, college graduated girl is just like kind of her finding her way in the world. She's broke. She has this best friend. They're both falling in love for the first time. They're both figuring out new things for the first time, finding themselves, keeping things from each other. It just goes on. It's just a beautiful like mirage of life. And I felt like the humor was so good and so niche to the time and to the place, and you can pick up on it just from just knowing very basic kind of things that were going on at the time. It also talked about larger things that were going on in the world, like the abortion issue in Ireland, of women in Ireland not being able to get abortions and having to travel to the UK, and the kind of money and cost and emotional things that go into that. So it had a lot to say just from like this one person's life and how beautiful and messy and normal it is. And so yeah, I really liked it. The kind of energy that went into it was very much like Dolly Alderton, or like Fleabag, of like, just like this messy girl just kind of figuring it out in her life. And the humor is very kind of like British or Irish, like that kind of.
Yeah. Love
And I
that.
listened to it on audiobook, and the narrator had an Irish accent, and it was very good. I just really enjoyed it, and I really connected to it in a lot of ways that, I don't know, just being a younger woman, maybe that's why I connected to it more, but I really enjoyed it. And I would give it like 3 stars.
I love when the Irish or a British person narrates, especially when it's a British or Irish book. But I also realize I can't speed it up too quickly when they do it, because I don't quite necessarily understand, depending on how thick their accent is. My next book was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This was a digital book that I read. Very beautiful, sweet story. It's an aquarium, a cleaning woman from an aquarium, and her relationship with this octopus. This octopus is part Houdini, part detective, and part thief. And there's some other characters. There's a little bit of romance. There is what's a wayward youth, though he's not really a youth, he's more in his 30s. There's a little mystery going on as to this guy's trying to find his father, and who his father is, and how that interacts with the characters and in the storyline. She was a widow. She took this job after her husband died. Her son had died 30 years before, and she still holds on with that. And I just loved it. It was, older characters, but they weren't like grandpas, or grandmas, just like sitting there, how they could be portrayed sometimes in literature and media. It was just wonderful. I gave this 4 stars.
I love that when books don't take the bait of playing into those stereotypes and like letting the stereotype do the work for the writer, but actually giving that person like a multi-dimensional human.
Yes.
It's nice and refreshing, especially when it's, older people or somewhere where it's like easier to take the cheap shot and just be like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, they give her a little romance, and yeah. And the octopus Marcellus was wonderful. He was great. You're in his brain, you're seeing what he sees. He figures out the mystery before the humans do. It was great.
I'm glad. Okay, so the next book I read was actually a reread, but it was The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. Walls. I always want to call her Wallace, but it's Jeanette Walls. I read this book in high school and really enjoyed it. And so I had kind of had this certain notion in my head of how the book would go from what I remembered. It was slightly different, but I still enjoyed it. From what I remembered, I thought it focused more on her adulthood. So the premise of the book is this woman who has this very unique childhood where her parents are constantly moving around. They call themselves nomadic. She calls them borderline homeless. And there's a lot of trauma that's involved. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma that you see. There's a lot of drinking and neglect, but the parents call it independence. Um, so there's this huge difference throughout the whole book between what her parents perceive to be as good, strong parenting in the face of capitalism in the world and trying to prepare their kids for real life and, you know, rage against the machine or whatever it is, right?
Huh.
But the kids, or the main character, one of the kids grows up and is like, she comes to this realization of how bad things really were, how dangerous things got at times, and her parents are still in her life today. So it takes this meaning of how to love your parents, even though things went terribly wrong in childhood and they're still not ready to admit to it.
So
And
this
yes,
is this is a true story. Okay, you knew what I was going to say.
it's a true story.
Oh,
But
wow.
then when I was rereading it, I didn't realize how much of it was just pretty factual recounts of her childhood. Just so many chapters were different stories, you know, and it kind of just goes on and on where you're like, I get it. It was really messy. It was really bad at times, but like get to the meaning part, you know, or
Yeah.
get to the adult part or tell a different story. Like, I don't know. So at times it just got a little factual. And then when I realized that she went on to be a journalist, it kind of made sense because some of the reading sometimes reads just very factual.
Okay.
Um, I would say it's like 3 stars, maybe 3.5. I think the story, like the meaning from this book is more powerful than the writing itself.
Yeah. Okay, I can
Um,
understand that.
so I think it's much up to the reader to also kind of interpret that and have personal connections to it, because if you're relying on the writing alone, you might not get there.
Okay.
But
So you gave that 3, you said.
yeah, it's like 3.25, maybe 3.5. This was also for my in-person book club.
Oh, okay. That's great. Yeah, you heard Jaxie.
Yeah.
My next book was, I went to my youth and I remember Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I remember the Disney movie. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be great for October. This is gonna be spooky and scary. Really wasn't that scary. It wasn't really that spooky somewhat. I give it 3 stars. I truly enjoyed it, but reading it as an adult, it was much more of like a satire, kind of like how Jane Austen does satire of the people in the book. This was a satire of her characters, of the people that he must have known by Washington Irving must have known back then, and it was great in that sense as a satire and just as a story, but it didn't give me the really good scare
Yeah.
I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Um,
Was it kind of like camp in that way? Like, was it like overdone or was it just,
no, it wasn't really overdone. It was just, it was just more plainly written.
Mhm.
It was more about Ichabod Crane, and I guess the Disney one in hindsight does kind of like poke fun at the characters,
Yeah.
but this was more in a more intellectual way, and the ending is kind of leaves you kind of like, what really happened there? But
Yeah.
it was a fun read, and it was a short read, so
Yeah. Um, yeah, so it sounds like we both kind of reread books that we had previously read and had very different interpretations the second time around. So if any of our listeners or watchers had similar experiences with rereading books, definitely comment and interact and say which books and what was your second interpretation. Because, you know, they do say like to really get to know the book, you have to read it like 3 times through. Um, in between different periods of time to fully grasp all the meanings, all the interpretations, and especially during different ages, like being a kid reading it and then being an adult. And then with this book that I just read, you know, I read it in high school and it was very so profound for me because, you know, I hadn't had that exposure to things. And then rereading it as an adult and reading, well, like I understand the meaning, yes, but the writing doesn't really get, you know, take you there.
yeah. I wonder if the high school you would have sided more with the parents, and now you're siding more with the child, as in she would have liked more structure and such.
I think no, I think I pretty much sided with her because some of the stuff is very extreme.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's you just have to read it, but some of the
Yeah.
stuff is very extreme. Like leaving her on the side of the road for hours, I don't think is anything a kid would really
Oh,
enjoy.
no, no, no.
Yeah, she was like 7 when that happened.
Oh my God.
And she believed it's because they didn't notice that she actually fell out of the car. Um,
She fell out and they didn't notice.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, there's it's a little bit more extreme. I was just
Yeah.
giving an overview, but so yeah, so the next book that I read is similarly to my last book in the fact that it's true, but this one is more like true-ish. So it's based off of a very real historical event, but the personal characters that you follow throughout the story like aren't real. Like they very well could be, but there's no factual account of their real lives. So this was called The Dance Tree, by Kieran something. I forget. Sorry. But the dance tree takes place in, I believe, the 1500s in Strasbourg, France, during the dance plague.
The dance plague.
Yes, I did not know this piece of history until I came across the book. And then I thought that reading the book would be a very interesting account of the history to get to know it, because even just the words dance plague just sparked my interest, um, because they took it so seriously as if it were any other health plague. They brought in doctors, they brought in like priests to do exorcists, they brought in police force to break down the dance plague. People were really believed to be possessed into this dance fury. It was all women. It was in one of the biggest heat waves of the summer in France. Some people died from exhaustion, from dehydration. People would dance without breaks for food or water or sitting. So that's where really like the thought of possession comes in, because people were floored of how possibly people could dance like that. Why?
Yeah.
Um,
That dance to their death. Why?
yeah, dance to their death, literally. And so it takes you through a few characters, their accounts of everyday life, and then the dance plague is happening in the background, and then it very much comes into their life, and some of the characters actually get involved with it. And it just takes you through so much historically accurate information, but not really that way, but like the feelings of the characters from what's going on in the historically relevant information. You understand why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, and you see the rationale for the dance plague without having the author write it out. Like, oh, the dance plague happened because of this. No, you meet these characters, you watch their lives unfold, you watch them be involved in the dance plague, and you completely understand and justify why this happened. So it's very interesting. It's a very little niche piece of history that I think if people know nothing about, I think this book would be a very great way to kind of explore that. So I really liked it. At times, though, the plot would become really slow.
Ah.
The writing itself is very vivid. You feel like you're right there, sweating, dying. um, but yeah, so sometimes it also became a little disturbing, a little angry because you don't like what's going on, and
Wow.
why else would
Interesting.
people be moved to do that if not if they were angry and disturbed?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very interesting. So I give it like 3.5 stars.
Sounds interesting. Definitely. That might be one for my TBR. My next book was Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. Not what you think. It's not like the mafia going around killing everybody. No, this was a mystery, first person narrator point of view. So you're only in his head. That is it. And it was a closed room, locked room mystery, which means whoever's done it is one of the characters you've read about. And it was isolated. It was, I don't remember what state it was in, but it was during the winter and a bad snowstorm. And you're trying to figure out who this person got murdered. This guy got murdered. You're trying to figure out who he is, who murdered him, and why, and what does it have to do with this family. And it just goes from there. And it was very interesting. It was snappy. It was I won't say it was fast paced because it's not, but it's very medium paced, and sometimes he's a little snarky because you're in his head and he thinks some snarky thoughts. And I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. I give that 4 stars. It really had me going, and no, I didn't figure it out. I'm a bad detective.
For someone who reads a lot of mystery, you would think.
I know. You think I'd get one. Nope.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. My next book that I read was The Adventures of Amina Al-Safari. It's a book that I've been meaning to read for the past couple months. I love this author so much. She's the author of the Davabad trilogy that I had read and talked about a lot earlier in our channel. This book is about, it takes place in the same world, but where the Davabad trilogy kind of more takes place in the magical side of the world with like one human influence. It's the reverse. So it takes place in the human world with one magical influence.
Oh.
The magic is the same and the people are in the same time and place, if that makes sense. So you don't have to read the Davabad trilogy to understand this book, but it definitely makes it a lot more enjoyable, and you catch certain references and you smile to yourself because you know what it means from the other books. But so it's about a retired pirate. She's a notorious, unapologetic, relentless, funny older woman. She's like 50. She's like, my knees hurt, but she's, has this thrill, and I don't know, just she loves life and she loves exploring, and she's very nostalgic for that. It's in her family, but now she has a child, and something had really bad had happened on her last voyage that they allude to a lot, but you don't get the full details for. But then this woman comes to the island about that last voyage. She knows some information about it. She uses it to threaten the pirate and says, you have to go on this one last adventure for me. You'll get $1 million. I forget the currency. You get a lot of money. And if you don't do it, I'll kill your family.
Oh.
And so it takes her onto this huge adventure back out of retirement. She goes and picks up her old crew. And the way things unfold are just so interesting. They're so thrilling. They're so adventurous. There's not a dull moment. You're always rooting for someone. You're always connecting with the characters, with the crew, or with her, or with what's happening. She's a very dimensional person. When she does things wrong, she knows that she does things wrong, but she handles it in a way that's very human. Like, it's a fantasy book, but I think the portrayals of the people in the story are so human, and sometimes more human than some of the literary fiction that you read. Wow. I just think the way that this author writes is incredible. I could go on and on about her, but I would say this was like 4 stars for me.
Another one for my TBR. I guess I have to read that other trilogy first, though, right? My next one was Small Spaces by Catherine Arden. Sorry, got a tickle. This was an audio. Again, it was another short novella, I should say. This was a middle grade book. I got it because I love Catherine Arden, and I've only read 1 book of hers, and I loved it, and I need to read more. And so I found this. It's called Small Spaces. It's a paranormal, scary, mysterious book. It's about an 11-year-old girl who she lost her mom in a plane crash, and since then she's kind of isolated herself from her friends and schoolmates, and she escapes into books. And one night, I can't remember why she was out, but I think she snuck out of the house, and she happened to run into this woman who was gonna like throw this book into the ocean. But so she steals the book from this woman, and she goes home, and then she goes on a classroom field trip, and they notice lots of scarecrows. And then she goes to the farm at this field trip, and she sees the woman. And then on the way home from the field trip, where some strange things happened, they start getting chased. And she and her 2 of her friends escape and hide in some small spaces and have to figure out how to save themselves from this monster that's coming for them, and to also save their schoolmates. And it was a lot of fun. It was interesting. I thought it was like 9-year-old me would give it 4 stars. Adult me gives it 3.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So yeah, I am in the process. I'm in like halfway through this book right now, so I won't give a full review, but I will just give my first thoughts. And I think part of the reason why I have such strong thoughts about it already is because I started reading it shortly after I started reading The Adventures of Amina Al-Safari. So I think what sometimes is hard is when you're reading a book, on paper that you really enjoy, and then you're also reading an audiobook that you're not liking that much.
Yeah.
You start to even notice the differences more. There's just more contrast. So this book is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer, and it has incredible reviews. So I was really hoping to like it, and so far I like the plot a lot. I think the idea is very creative. It's about a mysterious and reclusive children's book writer who wrote all these books and then kind of goes into hiding a little bit. He makes no mention, he's not in the press, he's nothing. And then one day he comes out and he says he finally wrote a sequel that everyone's been asking for, but he only has one copy and people can compete for it.
Oh.
Yeah, and like that's it. It's like winner takes all. But he invites the people who are competing. He ends up choosing 5 people that they have connections with from like fans that have written letters and stuff, invites them to the island that he lives on, and they compete for the copy.
Ooh.
It's a very interesting plot. I really enjoy that part of it, but the main character that we're following is just so annoying.
Oh, I hate that.
She's just like pretty adamant. I'll go fully into it when I finish the book. I'll save my thoughts, but the plot is very interesting. The main character that we follow is very annoying so far. Who knows if she will grow and change and develop throughout the book, and I'll end up liking her next time that we do the November reading wrap up, but you'll have to stay tuned and see my final thoughts on it.
Can't wait to hear about that. I had 2 more books. One was called Playing the Witch Card. It was an actual book by KJ Delatonio. It's about Flair, who is a witch, and she's a baker, and she moves back to her hometown from New York City with her daughter into her grandmother's old house. And there is something going on magically. She's not sure what, but in the meantime, she kind of, hexed her ex-husband, and she wants to remove that. She did by accident. Yep, oops. And it goes on from there. It was a little mystery, a little romance, nice, cozy, fantasy, witchy book. 3 stars.
Love it.
Last one was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches.
I'm going to read that.
Another cozy witchy fantasy. Another 3-star read. It was witches, and I love the magic in this world. It was like it gathers and you call to it, or it wants you to use it. It will play with you, kind of thing. This woman, she has to teach 3 youngins how to be witches because they have the abilities. They just need to learn to tame it, or the world will find out that they're witches, or something will happen. Because nobody is supposed to know they're witches. Witches are hidden and they don't even gather. But it was a little romance again, a little mystery again, and it was great, cozy with my tea and my candle. It was a nice, both of those were both 3 stars, 3.5 stars, and they were fun and just cozy and exactly what I needed at the time.
I'm glad. So it sounds like we had very much enjoyable months of reading. I feel like we didn't really give out many low-star books this month.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good month. It sounds like you very much stuck to the October vibes of this month and really followed your heart with that, which I appreciate. I tried to do that a little bit, but I'm also very much like a mood reader. Like if I come across a book that I feel very drawn to, I'm like, screw the TBR.
Yes.
I'll read this book right now. So I need to get a little bit more disciplined with that. But I also read about witches year round. So
Yeah.
I'll read that. But yeah.
Yeah, it was a good month, and 9 books. Granted, 2 of them were very, very thin, very small. But there was the chunker, which was a 2-star.
Yeah, and we can actually upload to Instagram soon our Storygraph statistics for this month. So if you're curious about all the books that we just mentioned, about the vibes, about the pages, about the genres, then that will be uploaded there as well. So you can have some hard statistics to go along with this video. But until next time, we'll be doing our November book of the month as our next video, probably.
Yep, there may be one or two in between. I'm hoping to do year-end challenge wrap
Yeah.
up of what I've read and where I am. So I'm hoping to get that done. So
Perfect. Yeah. So you can tune in for our individual videos that we do, but the next time you'll see the two of us together will be the November book of the month,
yep.
which is the Mixologists.
Yay.
So yeah, for that next video, you can just grab your cup of tea and come with your book. And if you want to read Hexologists with us, and you can tune in to see our thoughts and our feelings and opinions, you're more than welcome. But thank you for joining us to share our collected stories.
See ya.